Hi everyone, welcome to one of the first videos of the book mine. So my name is Demetrius and the book I'm reviewing today is I'm Surrounded by Idiots, written by Swedish behavioural expert Thomas Eriksson. So the book puts forward there are four personality colours out there. The reds, the greens, the yellows and the blues. And what this means is that each individual personality colour has their own unique set of characteristics relating to their strengths, their weaknesses, their temperament, their stress factors, and more or less just their own unique ideal way of doing things. So the book essentially equips you with a toolkit that you can use to help identify the different personality colours, and therefore you can tailor your approach. So if you know a certain individual is a certain personality colour, you can therefore match your communication style to suit the characteristics of this individual, and this makes you a much more appealing and convincing character. So the book essentially lets you develop your communication skills, your interpersonal skills. It lets you navigate across relationships rather effortlessly, and just lets you build a lot stronger relationships, both in your personal and in your work life. So as I go throughout the video and I start looking at the different personality colours, to get the best practice out of this video, what I'd recommend for you to do is to start thinking about your friends, your colleagues, your family members that might sit under the different personality colours. And in doing so, you'll already start to develop that toolkit I mentioned earlier that will really help you start tailoring your approach to the different individuals. Now, just before we start diving into the different personality colours, I have created a survey that is available in the description of the video below that you can do, and it will show you what personality colour you are. And just on that, you might not just be one personality colour, but you could be a combination of two or three. Regardless of this though, the higher your score in a certain personality colour, that is your predominant style. So you would mostly be that colour. But of course you can have a splash in your personality profile, like myself, so I am mostly red, but I've also got a splash of yellow and blue. So as I'm going to go into a lot of detail into each individual personality colour, this is going to be video 1 of a 5-part video series that's going to be released weekly to ensure we do a real deep dive into each individual personality colour. So this week, I am going to be focused on the reds. Hopefully this sounds all very exciting to you. So enough chit chat, let's dive into the book itself and let's get started. Okay, so I appreciate what I just did might have been a little weird because I didn't explain what I was doing. And no, there was zero chance of me trying to pull off Blue Steel from Zoolander. God knows I couldn't pull off that expression in a million years. But what I was trying to do was trying to give you some insight into what typical red body language or behaviour might look like. Whilst the reds are the rarest of all the personality colours, they're also one of the most easiest to identify. And that isn't just because they're the most opinionated, or the fact they're most competitive, or even the fact they're the most blunt. It's because reds make no effort to conceal who they actually are as a person. So you can typically tell you're dealing with a red by a few factors. First of all, if your hand has ever been crushed by a vice-like grip in a handshake, and that person has introduced himself or herself by leaning forward and making a bit of creepy eye contact, kind of like a staring contest, but not really. And then when it comes to their manner of speech, they tend to be fast-paced, they tend to be very convincing, and they tend to speak with really aggressive gestures. Maybe not like this, but like, for example, Donald Trump with his display of hands. Stuff like that really indicates you're dealing with a red. And then when you come out of that conversation and you're left with an impression of that person having a very strong personality, congratulations, you have been talking to a red. Now that we've established a typical red personality profile, it's worthwhile moving on to seeing how reds see themselves. Now, reds have very strong egos and it comes quite close to the yellows, so expect great glowing sentences about their strengths. They might call themselves as being a leader, as being efficient, straightforward, driven or ambitious, and mostly being results orientated. But how does this compare to their actual strengths and weaknesses? So a red's strength actually matches some of the perceptions they hold of themselves. To really hammer this point home, I want you to picture a scenario where you are a manager of a team who is struggling to meet a deadline. In this instance, a red might be the perfect solution were you to add one to the team. And this works for a number of factors, but first of all I want you to consider one of the main strengths of a red, and that is their razor-sharp focus. This works in two ways. One of the two ways in which a red's razor-sharp focus is beneficial towards a team, well, first of all, let's consider that reds are natural implementers. And by that, What I mean is, reds are great at identifying what has been done, what needs to be done, and how can we reach the end goal in the most streamlined fashion. And this is because of how a red's mind worked. They think things through with one thing in mind, and that is, so what? So meetings are a great example, and I'm sure we've all sat through a pointless meeting that was a complete waste of our time. Now, maybe it wasn't so bad as Michael Scott in The Office. I mean, he had a meeting about Uranus and, the planets. That's an important distinction. And in any case, that was a complete waste of time, and that's the kind of thing that a red would not stand for in a million years. And that's because of the way they think. So what? As soon as they heard it's a meeting about our solar system, you can guarantee they would have just walked out without a moment's hesitation. And this is because reds are so task focused. They have no problem stepping on people's toes to make sure that the end goal is achieved on time and is meeting the quality that's expected. Also, something that's very beneficial for a red working on a team that's kind of distinct from their razor sharp focus is the fact that a red is a natural convincer. It's quite hard to argue with logic generally, but when you pair that logic with conviction, confidence, and speed, it's quite an unbeatable combination, really. The second way in which red's razor sharp focus is a great addition to the team, well, that's partly just down to a red's very nature. They're exceptionally driven people. And actually, a red's typical profile is someone who is both dynamic and thrives under pressure. So obstacles, setbacks, and challenges, well, they really don't remain that way for long. And that's just because those kind of factors, that just ignites the fire within the reds even more ferociously, which makes them go about things in a very ruthlessly energetic and efficient manner. So having a red on the team is great just because a red is going to be fueled by those challenges. So they're going to be happy to take on the most challenging aspects of the project. And the fact they go about doing things in a ruthlessly energetic and efficient way, well, if you want to get the ball rolling within your team, having a red on your team is a great way to do so. Now, as I've gone through a typical red profile, I bet quite a few people might have popped into your head. And what's quite typical of reds is that they've got exceptionally strong personalities. In fact, they can be seen as being cold, autocratic, detached, poor listeners, psychopaths in the worst instance, and typically very poor listeners. And that's just because reds will rather direct and tell people rather than listen to them. And in fact, the way they go about doing things and focusing purely on the task at hand means a lot of human relations could potentially go out the window. And you might even feel like throwing yourself or the boss through the window if that person is a red. So there's a lot of weaknesses that are associated with a red as well. And just because I've gone through the strengths in quite a lot of detail, I think their weaknesses pretty more or less speak for themselves. Now that we've established the strengths, the weaknesses, and a typical red personality profile, it's quite obvious they're one of the stronger personality types out there. So the question inevitably emerges, how can I get the best out of my relationship with a red? Now, it's quite useful to actually bear the motive, it's my way or the highway, in mind. Because what you should be doing is you should be adapting to the red's behaviour by taking some of their characteristics and making them your own. And in doing so, you'll be speaking the language of a red. You'll be speaking to that person exactly how he or she wants to be spoken to. As we've discussed, reds are typically motivated by results, so it's quite a red thing to do to start decorating their walls of their office with their various achievements, be it degrees, certificates, etc. Now, where a salesman was to walk into this hypothetical office, notice the achievements hanging on the walls, and get further signs the person he's dealing with is red, then he knows he's going to have a field day. And that's because reds are the easiest personality type to sell to, and they're also one of the easier personality types to build a relationship with. And that's because of a few different reasons. Let's get into that. Okay, so the first reason why that salesman knows he's going to have a field day is because he knows he can get straight to business. Reds are hardwired to think things through with a task-like focus, so there's no need to make small talk or try to build a relationship, since reds would rather you get straight to the point anyway. The second principle is around the pitch itself. It should be short and as concise as possible. As usual, it should be structured and flow like a story. Any detail should be linked back to the bottom line, as reds aren't the best at dealing with detail, and it will really highlight the benefits of what you're trying to pitch. As speedy is synonymous with good for a red, if you can deliver this in a speedy fashion, all the more credit to you. The final principle is to speak with confidence. Reds are naturally confident individuals, and if they sense any hesitation, they will latch onto this and begin a bombardment of questions to check if you actually know your stuff. But if you remain confident throughout your pitch and the questioning, this will help you become really credible to the Reds' perception of you. Now, were Reds to be known for one thing, it would definitely be their temperament. And that's because a Red can typically go from 0 to 100 in a matter of seconds. So if we get a representative of a red's temperament to be a glass of some kind, it would probably be a shot glass. And that's because a shot glass really doesn't take much water before it starts overflowing. And for a red, as soon as it reaches that overflowing point, they're going to erupt. And they're going to get very angry and very loud and very aggressive very quickly. But the good news is that a red, once he's exploded, typically calms down. And that's because the thing that was annoying that red, he or her has gotten off their chest. They've expressed it and now they can move on. So typically once a red explodes, afterwards he becomes a bit more pleasant to deal with. The only issue is though, is that it really doesn't take much for that red to explode again, and again, and again. So of course, working with a red can be akin to working with a smouldering volcano. You don't know when it's going to erupt, you just know they eventually will. And of course, once it does happen, it's never a pretty sight. So it can be pretty damn tiring. However, an understanding of the red's pain points or stress factors can really help mitigate the red's stress. And this means working with that red becomes a lot more tolerable and a bit more easy. Now, reds are motivated by results. In an ideal world, they would love constant progress, new achievements, new metaphorical peaks to climb, and new problems to solve. They also really enjoy having power, both over aspects of work and people. So obviously, were you to invert this and take them away from any decision-making processes, or even give them work that they can't really progress in, this is inevitably going to be a pain point or stress factor to a red. Reds also have a particular love for efficiency. Waste of resources, slow and bureaucratic processes, silly mistakes, these are all things a red really doesn't like. This is something that would really grind their gears. So if you want to de-stress a red, and you also want to give them a new challenge, then a good thing to do would be to ask them to conduct a review of all the internal controls and processes and how would they make them more efficient. In doing so, you'll give them a new challenge to overcome, and also you'll give them a chance to work on something they feel really passionate about. Efficiencies. And a final thing, reds are inevitably a lot more hot-tempered than the other personality colours, but if you ask a red to calm down or to lower their voice and they're not actually angry or shouting, that is quite a big mistake. That's really going to make them angry. So just wanted to give that heads up as well. Now obviously giving bad news to a red is not the easiest thing to do, but there's a couple of things you need to bear in mind. First of all, make sure that you're going to be patient. A red was going to typically explode because they're going to take it personally and they'll explode again. All you have to do is just make sure that you take it on the chin, you stand firm, you stay confident, and in doing so, the red is going to realise that he's not going to get his or her way just by overpowering you with anger, basically. And of course, let's take the example of this. A co-worker has asked you to talk to the manager, who's a red, because that person's been put with so much pressure from the red that he or her is unable to sleep at night. This is how you should handle it. So as I said before, you can skip straight to business. Reds, they just don't do small talk. Now the trick you need to remember is, reds are task focused. They're not really there for human relations. They're there to do their job and to do it in the most efficient way as possible. So were you to appeal by emotion and say something along the lines of, look, the poor guy, he can't sleep at night. That's how much stress you're putting him under. That's probably just going to get a curt response from the red. What you need to do is link it by logic. And in doing so, the red will see a problem. And of course, he's going to analyze it and see what he can do to make the problem go away. So were you to change it to something along the lines of, look, the poor guy, he can't sleep at night. It's negatively affecting his performance because of the stress you're putting him under. And for the team, that means that our productivity is being depressed as well. We're reliant on him to do some processes. And if he can't do these to the standard, then of course we're impacted as well. You need to calm down with him. You need to give him less stress. Of course, the red will be a lot more receptive to this because he sees that he's actually causing a problem and it's impacting the team's efficiency. So therefore, something will happen. It's not just going to be a curt response. It'll probably lead to a more positive action. So, what do you guys think of the reds? Have you got any really funny stories that involves the red? Please share this by using the comment box below. And on that note, please remember to like and subscribe to the channel as well. Make sure you hit that notification bell so you never miss a video, especially if you're a yellow, because that's the personality colour I will be reviewing next week. So I'm going to end the video with a quote that should fit in with a red personality mindset, and that's just because I'm such a massive fan of quotes. And of course guys, thank you very much for watching.